Israel, a nation born from ancient history and modern tragedy at the heart of global conflict. Its wars have shaped borders, society, and the world's politics. To understand the Middle East today, we must first understand the battles that forged modern Israel. This relentless focus on security has driven innovation, but at a tremendous human cost. To understand today's conflict, we must look back. In 1948, Israel declared independence, sparking war with its neighbors. Each battle, from the War of Independence to the Six-Day and Yom Kippur Wars, reshaped borders and identities. These wars forged Israel's military doctrine and left unresolved tensions, with the past still echoing in every new escalation. The birth of Israel in 1948 was a desperate fight for survival. Surrounded by hostile armies, outgunned and outnumbered, Israelis, many Holocaust survivors, faced annihilation. Against all odds, they turned the tide, securing their homeland but at a staggering cost, over 6,000 dead, and a refugee crisis that still shapes the region today. After the 1948 war, Israel faced a fragile ceasefire and unrecognized borders. The young nation absorbed waves of immigrants, built a new society, and endured constant threats. Security shaped every aspect of life with a citizens' army and a doctrine of swift response. Despite hardship, Israel grew stronger, forging resilience that would define its future. In 1956, Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal triggered a crisis, uniting Israel, Britain, and France against Egypt. Israel invaded Sinai, breaking the blockade and swiftly defeating Egyptian forces. But global outrage forced a withdrawal. Still, Israel secured open access to the Straits of Tiran, reshaping the region's balance. By 1967, Arab armies massed on Israel's borders, Nasser expelled UN peacekeepers, and the Straits of Tiran were blockaded. Israel faced annihilation. With diplomacy dead and the threat existential, Israel's leaders chose a preemptive strike. On June 5, Israeli jets destroyed Egypt's air force in hours, gaining total air supremacy. Ground forces surged into Sinai and Gaza. Egypt's army collapsed. Jordan attacked, Israel countered, capturing the West Bank and reunifying Jerusalem. In the north, Israel seized the Golan Heights after fierce fighting. In just 6 days, Israel's territory and sense of security expanded dramatically. The war's outcome would transform the region and Israel's destiny. Israel's stunning victory brought euphoria and a new dilemma. The nation now ruled over 1 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, facing a moral and demographic crossroads. Granting citizenship threatened Israel's Jewish character, denying rights challenged its democracy. UN Resolution 242 called for withdrawal from territories, but ambiguity fueled decades of deadlock. The capture of biblical lands inspired a settlement movement, complicating any future peace. International admiration turned to scrutiny as occupation became entrenched. The Six-Day War's triumph planted seeds of enduring conflict over land, identity, and Israel's soul. A new era of challenge had begun. Israel's post-1967 confidence bred dangerous complacency. Ignoring warning signs, leaders dismissed Egypt and Syria's military buildup as bluster. On Yom Kippur 1973, Arab armies struck by surprise, shattering Israel's sense of invincibility. The attack exposed intelligence failures and the peril of underestimating adversaries. Egypt's Sadat sought to break the stalemate and force negotiations through shock. The war's opening days were a near disaster, forever altering Israel's strategic mindset. The lesson: military superiority is no substitute for vigilance. The cost of hubris would be paid in blood. October 6, 1973, Yom Kippur. Egypt and Syria launched a devastating surprise attack. Israeli defenses buckled, the Bar-Lev line fell, and Syrian tanks surged into the Golan. Panic gripped the nation as defeat seemed imminent. Heroic tank crews and rapid reserve mobilization turned the tide. In the north, Israel pushed Syrian forces back to the gates of Damascus. In the south, Sharon's daring canal crossing encircled Egypt's Third Army. The war ended with Israel battered but victorious, at a terrible cost. Over 2,600 Israelis died. The myth of invincibility was shattered. Israel learned never underestimate the enemy. After Yom Kippur, Israel's next challenge came from Lebanon, not a state army, but the PLO. PLO attacks from southern Lebanon made life in northern Israel unbearable. In 1982, Israel invaded to expel the PLO and reshape Lebanon's politics. The initial military campaign was swift. Arafat and his fighters were forced out, but the occupation spiraled into a bloody quagmire: civil war, massacres, and the rise of Hezbollah. International condemnation and domestic protest followed. The war dragged on, draining Israel's morale and resources. Lebanon became a cautionary tale: easy to enter, impossible to control. Israel's long occupation of South Lebanon gave rise to Hezbollah, a powerful force backed by Iran and Syria. In 2006, Hezbollah's cross-border raid and rocket attacks triggered the Second Lebanon War. Israel faced a new kind of enemy: decentralized, resilient, and deeply embedded among civilians, making victory elusive. In the south, Gaza became a flashpoint as Hamas, an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, rose during the First Intifada, rejecting compromise and gaining support among Palestinians. In 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza, hoping for peace. But Hamas seized control, turning Gaza into a launchpad for attacks and sparking a new era of conflict. After Hamas took control of Gaza, Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade. Hamas responded with rocket attacks, turning southern Israeli towns into frontline communities. This cycle led to repeated conflicts: cast lead, pillar of defense, and protective edge, each causing devastation but never resolving the underlying tensions. The violence became a grim, repeating pattern with no lasting solution in sight. The constant threat of rocket attacks from Gaza and Lebanon led Israel to develop the Iron Dome, a revolutionary air defense system that intercepts rockets in mid-air, saving countless lives and becoming a symbol of Israeli ingenuity. But enemies adapted, launching massive volleys to overwhelm the system, fueling a constant technological arms race. Iron Dome manages the threat but cannot solve the deeper conflict driving the violence. Despite Israel's overwhelming military and technological superiority, the recurring conflicts with Hamas made it painfully clear that there was no purely military solution to the Gaza problem. Each major operation ended in a tactical victory, but a strategic stalemate. Hamas's military wing would be damaged, but its political control over Gaza and its core ideology remained intact. The destruction and civilian casualties inside Gaza often fueled more hatred and created a new generation of recruits, ensuring the conflict would continue. This reality forced Israeli strategists and policymakers to grapple with an uncomfortable question: if war cannot bring a decisive end, what other options exist? One approach, often debated within Israel, was the concept of mowing the lawn. This grim metaphor described a strategy of periodic military operations to degrade Hamas's capabilities whenever they grew to an unacceptable level. It was not a strategy for victory but for management. The idea was to keep the threat contained and manageable through repeated limited military action, restoring deterrence for a few years at a time. This approach accepted the lack of a permanent solution and focused instead on maintaining a level of quiet for Israeli citizens. Critics, however, argued that this was a cynical and unsustainable strategy that guaranteed endless cycles of bloodshed and condemned both Israelis and Palestinians to a future of perpetual conflict. Diplomatic avenues were constantly explored but yielded little success. The deep ideological chasm between Israel and Hamas made direct negotiations impossible. Hamas does not recognize Israel's right to exist, and Israel, along with much of the Western world, designates Hamas as a terrorist organization. Therefore, any communication had to be conducted through third-party intermediaries, primarily Egypt and Qatar. These negotiations focused almost exclusively on short-term arrangements, ceasefires, prisoner exchanges, or easing the blockade in return for quiet. They never touched upon the core political issues, leaving the fundamental drivers of the conflict to fester, ready to erupt again at any moment. Ultimately, the Gaza issue is inseparable from the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Many analysts argue that a long-term solution for Gaza is only possible within the framework of a viable two-state solution, which would address Palestinian aspirations for statehood and sovereignty. However, with the peace process moribund for years, the deep schism between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and a hardened political climate on all sides, this solution has seemed more distant than ever. The Gaza conundrum thus remains one of Israel's most complex and unsolvable security challenges, a volatile microcosm of a much larger unresolved regional tragedy. On October 7, 2023, the illusion of a manageable Gaza conflict was shattered. Hamas launched a meticulously planned, unprecedented attack, breaching Israel's fortified border and unleashing brutal violence on civilians. Israel responded with massive mobilization and a relentless campaign in Gaza, marking a fundamental shift in strategy and a new, unpredictable phase of conflict. After October 7th, Israel's northern border became a tense flashpoint. Hezbollah, Iran's powerful proxy, chose daily cross-border attacks over all-out war, tying down Israeli forces and showing support for Hamas. The result? A simmering war of attrition with rockets, drones, and constant anxiety on both sides. By May 2024, the risk of a wider, devastating conflict was higher than ever. For years, Israel and Iran fought a shadow war, cyber attacks, assassinations, and proxy battles. But in April 2024, that changed. A suspected Israeli strike hit Iran's consulate in Syria, killing top commanders and crossing a red line. Iran responded with its first direct assault, hundreds of drones and missiles fired at Israel. Israel and its allies intercepted nearly all threats, but the rules of engagement had changed forever. After Iran's direct assault, Israel faced immense pressure to show restraint and avoid a wider war. President Biden urged Netanyahu not to retaliate militarily. Israel responded with a limited strike near Isfahan, sending a clear message but avoiding massive damage. The region remains on edge, with a new precedent set for direct conflict and the risk of escalation higher than ever. Israel's military might is unmatched in the region, with advanced technology and powerful armed forces. Yet, decades of conflict show that battlefield victories alone cannot bring lasting peace or security. Against groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, conventional force has clear limits. True security for Israel demands not just military strength, but also diplomacy and real efforts to address the roots of conflict. In the face of escalating regional conflict, the most immediate path away from the abyss is a combination of robust deterrence and intensive diplomacy. The direct exchange between Israel and Iran in April of 2024 established a new, dangerous form of deterrence. Both sides demonstrated their willingness and capability to strike each other directly, creating a fragile balance of fear. Maintaining this deterrence requires Israel to project strength and credibility, making it clear that any future aggression will be met with a decisive and painful response. However, deterrence is inherently unstable. It relies on rational calculations and clear communication, which can easily break down amidst the fog of war, leading to catastrophic miscalculation. This is where diplomacy becomes indispensable, acting as the essential safety valve. The back-channel communications and direct interventions by the United States and other global powers were critical in pulling both Israel and Iran back from the brink of a full-scale war. Future de-escalation will depend heavily on strengthening these diplomatic mechanisms. This includes creating clear red lines, establishing reliable channels for crisis communication to prevent misunderstandings, and leveraging international pressure to restrain all parties. Diplomacy provides the off-ramps necessary to de-escalate a crisis before it spirals out of control, offering alternatives to purely military responses that could ignite the entire region. A more proactive diplomatic strategy involves expanding the circle of peace, building on the foundation of the Abraham Accords. These landmark agreements normalized relations between Israel and several Arab nations, including the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, proving that historical animosities could be overcome through shared interests, particularly in countering Iranian influence and fostering economic cooperation. The pursuit of a normalization deal with the ultimate prize, Saudi Arabia, remains a key strategic goal. Such an alliance would fundamentally reshape the Middle East, creating a powerful moderate bloc that could collectively work to isolate extremists, contain Iranian aggression, and promote regional stability, offering a vision beyond perpetual conflict. However, these diplomatic efforts face immense hurdles. The ongoing war in Gaza and the humanitarian crisis have put a chill on the normalization process, making it politically toxic for Arab leaders to publicly embrace Israel. Furthermore, Iran and its proxies are actively working to sabotage such efforts as regional integration poses a direct threat to their revolutionary ideology. For diplomacy to succeed, it must be accompanied by a credible security framework and, crucially, tangible progress on the Palestinian issue, which remains the emotional and political core of the conflict for much of the Arab and Muslim world. Without addressing this central wound, any regional peace will remain fragile. The unresolved fate of the Palestinian people remains at the heart of the conflict. Generations have struggled over the same land, fueling cycles of violence and deep divisions. The two-state solution, an independent Palestine alongside Israel, has long been the vision for peace, but hope is fading. Yet finding a just resolution is essential for lasting security and peace in the region. Israel's story is one of survival and conflict, forged by war since 1948. Military strength has secured its existence, but lasting peace remains elusive. The sword has defended the nation, yet it cannot alone build a peaceful home. Today, Israel stands at its most critical crossroads since its founding. The catastrophic intelligence failure of October 7th and the subsequent multi-front war against Hamas, Hezbollah, and their Iranian patron have shattered old paradigms. The nation is locked in a direct and open confrontation with the Islamic Republic of Iran, a conflict that has moved out of the shadows and onto the world stage. The stakes are higher than ever, pushing the entire Middle East to the brink of a regional conflagration. This new reality forces a fundamental question upon the nation and its leaders. What is the ultimate purpose of its immense strength? The path forward presents two divergent possibilities. One is to double down on the doctrine of military supremacy, to believe that even greater force and more advanced technology can eventually crush all opposition and impose a victor's peace. This path seeks to achieve ultimate deterrence through overwhelming power, a strategy that views diplomacy and compromise as weaknesses to be avoided. It is a path that risks deeper international isolation, endless cycles of retaliatory violence, and a future where the nation's children are perpetually conscripted into the next inevitable war, forever living by the sword in a hostile neighborhood. The alternative path is one that seeks to integrate Israel's undeniable strength with a courageous and pragmatic search for political solutions. This approach recognizes that military power is a necessary but insufficient condition for long-term security. It understands that true peace cannot be imposed, but must be negotiated. This path requires taking calculated risks for diplomacy, engaging with the core grievances that fuel the conflict, and working with international partners to build a more stable regional architecture. It means leveraging Israel's power not just to win wars, but to create the conditions where wars are no longer necessary. Ultimately, the future of Israel will be defined by the choice it makes at this historic juncture. Will its incredible strength continue to be used solely as a tool for survival in an endless conflict? Or can it become the foundation upon which a lasting, negotiated peace is built? On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a surprise preemptive strike on Iran in response to escalating threats over the previous year. The immediate trigger was Iran's direct ballistic missile attack on Israeli territory in May 2024, coordinated with Hezbollah and other proxies, following Hamas's October 7, 2023 assault. Israeli intelligence indicated that Iran was nearing operational capability for a nuclear weapon and planning further proxy attacks through Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. By striking Iranian nuclear sites, military infrastructure, and command centers, Israel aimed to neutralize what it viewed as an existential threat, degrade Iran's ability to coordinate regional militias, and re-establish military deterrence across the Middle East. The answer remains unwritten, hanging in a delicate balance between the lessons of a violent past and the hopes for a different future.